Hello, this is Charlie from Tropical Birding, and welcome to this video trip report from my recent birding trip to Central Asia, which included the countries of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. Please check out this PDF, which accompanies this video trip report. It includes a link to this video, the itinerary, birds of the trip there, and a full checklist of all the things we saw. There's a link to the eBird trip report, and also a link there to some photos on iNaturalist. Let's start with a map. Uzbekistan is a landlocked country surrounded by several other Central Asian countries, other stans, including Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. As you can see, it's quite a dry country. This is an extension, a one-week extension to the main tour, which visits Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. On this tour, we combine birding with also some cultural visits to some of the amazing places in the country. We start the tour in Tashkent, the capital, very modern city. You'll quickly notice that most of the cars here are the same brand, which is Chevrolet. It's rather strange, but Chevrolet has a bit of a monopoly on the car industry here. So yeah, everywhere you go, you see Chevrolet cars. I arrived a day early and had time to go and check out the botanical gardens in town, which is a very nice green space. Good place to get grips with some of the more common birds in the country. It's a very pleasant green place to walk around. Quite a bit of wildlife to see there. We saw these Eurasian red squirrels with their lovely ear tufts, and also some common birds, including the common wood pigeon, the Central Asian subspecies. And also this beautiful little bird, the azure tit. In some places they have a white chest, and in this area they have a yellow breast. The next day we drive south to the city of Samarkand, a very historical city. We stopped for lunch on the way and had some local food. Uzbekistan prides itself on its bread, these kind of round-shaped breads that are cooked in tandoor ovens. And we also got a chance to try the national dish, which is called plov. It's like a rice dish with some vegetables and meat on top. When we arrived in Samarkand, we went to a nice hotel, quite a like a small sort of boutique establishment. And later we were met by our cultural guide, Faruza, very nice lady. And she took us around some fantastic places in Samarkand. We heard a lot about the national hero of Kazakhstan called Timur, who was a great military leader, lived about over 600 years ago in the 14th century. And many of the buildings, this is Timur's mausoleum. But they also had a bit of a museum inside where we could learn about some of his military campaigns. They say about 5% of the world population of the time, about 17 million people, were killed in his military campaigns, but he remains the national hero. But yeah, he had a huge influence on the surrounding countries and areas. He had campaigns to India. They say the Taj Mahal was actually modeled on some of the buildings in Samarkand. This is the world famous Registan Square, with just stunning buildings, and inside they were just breathtakingly beautiful. Some of them just covered in gold leaf and just painted beautiful, like blue and purple and gold. I mean, they were absolutely breathtaking to see. Bit of a neck stretcher to look up at the ceiling sometimes. So the local guide said the best way to take a picture was to put your camera on the ground and put it on a timer, and then you can get your faces there. In the evening, we went to a lovely restaurant, had some more Uzbek bread. I'm a vegetarian, but there was plenty of food for vegetarians, and probably more salad than I've eaten on any other tour. They're just crazy about salads. So we had some really nice salads. And this is an orange tea with cloves and ginger, kind of spicy, sweet tea, which we had almost every day, which everybody really liked. We had some great breakfasts as well, lots of cold cuts and cheese and fruit and vegetables, pancakes and cakes, and yeah, there was plenty to eat. The next morning we drove south up into some mountains to the Takta Koracha Pass. It's quite a mountainous area. A lot of kind of dry, scrubby hills, although it had rained quite a bit recently, and was quite green. Of course, we drove up there in Chevrolets. And this is some of the habitat that we were birding. Quite rocky, lots of trees in blossom and green grass and lovely flowers. This is one of the beautiful flowers we saw called Ferula. And in the afternoon, it was back to Samarkand for some more sightseeing. We visited some more tombs. And our guide showed us how they produce some of the amazing tile work and mosaic. Very interesting. Guess what this is? It's a shop. Can you believe it? Yeah, we went in there. I mean, they had like a coffee machine in there, and they were selling Pepsi. And yeah, and this lady was just so beautifully dressed. So I asked nicely if I could take a picture of her in front of her shop. The next day, it was on to our next site, which is the city of Bukhara, another very historical city. Slightly different emphasis from Samarkand. It's got a real, it's all these kind of open air bazaars and stuff. It was a very cool place. The places we stayed were very nice, very clean, kind of quaint little establishments. Some huge chairs in the lobby. It's another fantastic square they had there with this beautiful tower. They say when the Soviets invaded, they bombed it and it was rebuilt. When we were there, there was a festival going on, a 3-day festival, and there was a lot of music and dancing in places, which was a wonderful time to visit. You can see all these locals dancing there. It was very nice to see a lot of locals visiting the place as well, having a great time. And there was lots of sort of music and dance shows as well. Very cool. As I said, in Bukhara is all about these bazaars, and historically there were these domes, and each dome they produced different things. So there was like the hat maker's dome and the carpet maker's dome and things like that. So we wandered around some of these very historical bazaars. And they still make a lot of the things there. They make their own carpets, and like from silk and from cotton. We went around some workshops as well to see how they wove the carpets, and also how they carved the metalwork there. But I mean, it's a shopper's paradise. If you love shopping and buying souvenirs and stuff, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And it's not like this is a touristy thing. This has been going on for hundreds of years, so it's kind of interesting to see a modern version of what's been there for so long. These are silkworms, and they showed us, and this is the raw silk on the left, and all the natural dyes that they use. There's like walnut shells and onion skins and mulberries and saffron. And they dye this silk, and they weave all this stuff. It was really, really interesting to see. This is a lady showing us how she was doing some embroidery. So, of course, you can watch these things, and then, you can buy things if you like. And then at night, of course, it was more wonderful salads. So many salads. This is another great dish I really enjoy, being a vegetarian. This is like a sort of pastry full of melted cheese and egg. The next day, we had a very early start. We woke up at 3 a.m. and we went out to the desert, to the Kyrgyzstan desert. And this is a habitat that we were visiting there. Had these kind of vegetated sand dunes with these very dry bushes called saksol. But here we were looking for a very special bird called the Turkestan, or the panda's ground jay. It's a corvid, like a crow, but it's totally unique. Very smart looking bird. It's one of the star birds of this extension. And lots of other interesting wildlife there. We saw yellow ground squirrels. We had these cool little lizards called race runners. This, I think, is called the lion race runner. And on the way back, even though it's very desolate and open, you got some places with some houses, and people had planted trees, and they formed like a migrant trap. So we stopped at a couple of these places, and they're just full of warblers. The birds are like migrating over the desert, and they just drop down on these little oases of trees for a rest. So just full of these warblers, and of course, being old world warblers, are not nice and colourful like the North American ones, but still quite nice to look at. This is a booted warbler here. Lots of lesser white throats, chiff-chaffs, all sorts of stuff. Sometimes can be a little tricky to ID, but we had a very knowledgeable local guide. We also stopped at some kind of fish ponds, where there was quite a few water birds like black-tailed godwit and little stint, and some European bee-eaters, very beautiful. And we were also lucky enough to come across this cat called the jungle cat. I think this was a little bit of a sick individual, but it's just amazing to see this wild cat. Very, very seldom seen. I think it was the first record on iNaturalist. And then it was back to Bukhara in the afternoon. We were all a little bit tired because we had an early start, but we still managed a couple of hours of sightseeing. And we went to the summer palace where where Timur's wives used to stay. It was like a sort of walled, beautiful garden. And some of it was built in a more sort of Western style. We had a lovely day, blue skies. It was lovely. Peacocks wandering around the garden. And then, of course, there was more places to buy things and little coffee shop tea rooms and stuff. It was a really delightful place. On the final morning, we went to a place called the Jairon Eco Center. And here was a place where they were reintroducing some mammals, rare mammals that had been extirpated, including these Asiatic wild asses, like the wild ancestor of the donkey, and these Przewalski's horses, which are also the wild ancestor of the domesticated horse. This is the area and the nice lake there that we visited. We had this rare marble duck flying in, red-crested pochards, some of the clients taking a rest in the shade with one of the park rangers. We had these cute little Afghan tortoises. And then finally, we went to the train station and took a high-speed train back to Tashkent. Those that wanted to could pay a little extra to go in the sort of VIP lounge, which they called the increased comfort room. This is me in front of the high-speed train. This train system was actually bought from the Spanish high-speed rail system. Very modern, very comfortable, very quick. It was a very nice thing to ride. And here you can see the habitat out the window. Zooming by, you can see it's quite dry. And we arrived back in Tashkent for the night. The next morning we had breakfast, and they had a nice coffee machine with all the different types of coffees written in Russian. Russian is still one of the main languages spoken here. Even Uzbeks from different parts of the country sometimes speak together in Russian. So, and our local guide was Russian, so it's definitely the sort of lingua franca for the region. On the final morning, we took a drive from Tashkent to the Chimgan Valley, a very scenic hilly area nearby with some very nice birds. It's got a few like pine forests and stuff on the slopes of these hills. This is what it looked like on the ground. We had a lovely morning's birding. Lots of raptors. We had these short-toed snake eagles, Eurasian griffin vultures. We had this lovely white-capped bunting. Really one of the best-looking bunting species. And another big target for the morning was a rufous-naped tit that we tried hard for and eventually found. So that was great. Another nice bird that we saw, the long-tailed shrike. And on the way back, we visited a place with sort of reed beds, and we found this lovely bird, the white-crowned penduline tit. It was back to Tashkent, and from there we flew to Kazakhstan to begin the main tour. We arrived in Almaty, and the backdrop to the city of Almaty has these beautiful snowy mountains, the Tian Shan Mountains, really, really spectacular. And when, when we arrived, the local ground agent there in the orange hat, she arranged a sort of welcome by these traditional Kazakh singers, which was rather special. We went to our hotel, and just a couple of doors down, they had this like liquor store where they sold all these different beers on tap. So you bought like a plastic 1.5 liter bottle, and then they filled it with whichever beer you wanted. So this is Ian Campbell, who came along on the trip with his beer that he's just filled. The next day, we drove to the Sharon Canyon National Park. And we took a look at the canyon there, spectacular canyon, and also this dry plain called the Sogeti Plain. Very flat and desolate. On the way out, this is our interpreter called Ali B. He stopped and translated for us at this little local cheese stall. These little round things here are some local cheeses, and they also had some camel milk. This is the Sharon Canyon National Park. And here, it was a little bit windy this day, but yeah, looking over the canyon. Should also be able to see it here on Google Earth. Very kind of rugged area. Also got some places, like along the river here, some very different habitat. It gets riverine forest. In the rocky areas, got some things like chukka partridges. And we also, birded some of these like dry plains and little gravelly dry gorges and stuff. This is our local guide, Aren Vasink, who was author of the Birds of Kazakhstan. Very lucky to get him. Not a whole lot of birds there, but some good ones. We saw a little speck in the distance, and it got closer and closer and ended up flying right over our heads. It's a steppe eagle, very rare migrant raptor, which breeds around here. We also took another walk in another little dry gully, looking for a very special bird called the Asian desert warbler. Yeah, of course, not bright colors in this habitat. It's very well camouflaged against kind of brown sand and gravel. And at night we stayed in a hunting lodge, or a former hunting lodge, in that kind of riparian forest, and it's full at night of these calling Eurasian scops owls, which were quite easy to find. So that was a real treat. In the morning, somebody put their boots on and got a bit of a shock when there was a toad inside one of them. It's called a Xinjiang toad. Xinjiang being the westernmost province of China. And a short walk in the morning also produced these beautiful vocal common nightingales, which are real amazing songsters. Usually quite shy, but I managed to get a little bit of footage of one here. Gorgeous birds. Also saw a tolai hare, the local species of rabbit. We drove on towards the country of Kyrgyzstan, where we were going to go and explore the Tian Shan mountain range. On the way, we stopped for a picnic lunch prepared by our driver and local translator. And we were given like chocolate every day, this Kazakhstan chocolate. And at the end of the tour, I went to a supermarket and bought about 10 bars of this chocolate as souvenirs. So from the Sharon Canyon, we went over a couple of passes and crossed the border into Kyrgyzstan and drove to the town of Karakol. This is a little sign, I love Karakol. And here we stayed in this just delightful lodge run by a Japanese lady. She was like a JICA volunteer, which is like the Japanese Peace Corps. And she married a Kyrgyz man, and she took him to Japan and showed him a traditional Japanese ryokan, or inn, and they came back and sort of built this Japanese style lodge in Kyrgyzstan, and it was just beautiful. It was a wonderful place to stay. They had a few, it's quite popular for tourists, quite amazing really. I mean, I'd never really heard of tourists going to Kyrgyzstan, but yeah, it's quite a popular place for hiking and sort of outdoor stuff. And they've got a fairly decent tourist infrastructure, including some fantastic restaurants, and we ate at the same place 3 nights in a row, and it was just delicious food. This is a local Uyghur dish called lakhman, which is quite popular. And they have, this is another local cold soup, vegetable soup. And I can't remember what these are called, but they're like little dough balls that you dip in sour cream, which were rather nice. Eating in the same restaurant were a group of Kyrgyz ladies, and they asked me to take their picture. And then after I'd taken it, I asked them if I could take a picture with my camera. Yeah, but yeah, delightful people, the Kyrgyz. We always had very nice breakfasts in the morning, lots of fruit and eggs and dried fruit and fresh fruit and nuts and things. Yeah, porridge. It was really nice. And we spent 2 full days exploring the Tian Shan Mountains. Tian Shan Mountains sort of runs on to the Himalayas, but it's this kind of separate and very large mountain range, spectacular mountains, and just full of fascinating birds. We also got these grey marmots there, these little kind of like prairie dog type things. There's lots of different habitats we saw here. There was very nice spruce trees here, Shrink's spruce, and higher up more kind of gravelly areas. This is the scanning these kind of gravel slopes. One of the big targets of the day were these Himalayan snowcocks. Quite easy to hear, but very difficult to find. And we probably spent an hour looking for these things before we finally found them and got really decent scope views. We went higher and higher up these slopes, hitting lots of different habitats, very kind of alpine tundra type stuff with these very low sort of alpine flowers. And then right at the top, it was even snowing. There was almost no vegetation up there. We were looking for one bird, didn't see it because of the weather, the Altai Center, but really quite cool to get some snow. And then on the way back down, we birded some more of these spruce forests and these rocky areas, and we saw some wonderful birds. I think we got 5 species of redstarts, which are all kind of different colors and just delightful birds. This is Yuri Gagarin, who was the first man in space, the Russian cosmonaut. And they had like a little statue of him here. When he went to space and then came back, he took a holiday afterwards. And this was still part of the Soviet Union back then. And he came and spent a week on the banks of Isikul, the big lake there, and also came up into these beautiful hills here in the Barskun Valley. On our second day, we went up a different valley. On the base of it, we saw these beautiful pine buntings. A little bit higher up, we got some fantastic bearded vultures or lammergeiers. You can see its little beard here. And again, we were scanning for birds. This time, a very special bird, which was maybe the most wanted bird of the trip for some people who were collecting bird families. The ibis bill. This is a monotypic family. It looks same shape as an ibis, but actually a little bit more closely related to the plovers. And higher up, we birded this kind of montane scrub, and they had some lovely birds up there as well, including this Himalayan rubythroat. Our ground agent is called Rubythroat Birding Tours, and their logo is this gorgeous little bird. Yeah, stunning scenery. I mean, it was their favorite day for many people on the tour. It was bird filled and just gorgeous scenery. So it was fantastic. Lots of horses around here. The Kyrgyz really like horses, and everywhere you went, there was these like herds of horses like running around. And then it was back to Kazakhstan. We stopped on the way again in the Sharon Canyon area at a picnic site where we had lunch. And from there, it was back to Almaty for one night. And the following day, we drove towards the Taukum Desert and stopped on the way at this wonderful lake called Lake Sorbulak. Here you can see us arriving on the edge of the lake and setting up the scope. And it had tons of water birds there. It was really amazing. Yeah, lots of widespread things like these pied avocets. 2 species of pelicans, including this Dalmatian pelican, the biggest pelican in the world. And also a very special duck, an endangered species called the white-headed duck, which, for what it's worth, was my 7,500th species. So it was quite a a milestone bird for me. On the way to the Taukum Desert, we passed through this area that had all these like piles of rocks on the side of the road, and they were just loaded with these gorgeous like pale pink and black rosy starlings. So from Lake Sorbulak we drove on up to the Taukum Desert and the town of Kanshengel. So we birded a little bit around here before heading into the desert. The desert here is full of these little bushes, artemisia, or wormwood bushes, very reminiscent of the karoo in South Africa. On the way in, we flushed this Eurasian nightjar and managed to spot where it landed and got some photos. And we stayed here for 2 nights in a yurt camp. These are yurts or jurs, as known in Mongolia. And this is a traditional housing for some of these kind of nomadic people of the region. This is the bathroom yurt. You see they've got like a shower curtain, and they put down like a wooden pallet which you stand on, and there's this water bag and a pipe and a little nozzle, and then you just twist that and you can have a little shower in privacy there. It was very nice. Yeah, it was warm by the sun, so it wasn't real cold, but yeah, very, very refreshing. This was mine and Ian's bedroom yurt. And then this is inside the dinner yurt. And the food was particularly good. Yeah, they had a good chef, made some really nice food. Some days when the weather was good, we set up the tables outside. And they always had plenty of walnuts and apricots and stuff. I don't think I've ever eaten so many apricots or walnuts. This is another noodle dish, another lachman. Lots of nuts and dried fruit. And next to the camp, this was sort of on the edge of the plain, and then you just got some low dunes that were covered in sort of slightly bigger bushes, which had slightly different birds. One of the common birds in the area was this beautiful red-headed bunting, which were in full song. We went out at night a little bit and found these wonderful little reptiles called the common wander gecko. And these young ones had their tails sticking up in the air. It was very, very cool. One day we had pancakes for breakfast, which was very nice. Some of the birds that we were looking for in that area, black-bellied sandgrouse, were particularly common. We saw them on the ground and also flying around. We had this greater sand plover, which were breeding there. Lots of larks, including these calandra larks, greater short-toed larks. We drove up a road through the desert with lots of dunes there to an area with these saxol bushes again, and here we got this very localized bird called the saxol sparrow. Very pretty bird. Bird on the front of the birds of Central Asia, the saxol sparrow. Big target for the tour. We also saw lots of interesting reptiles, including these steppe agamas, which would climb up into the trees. This one's wanting to escape. And we drove to an area with this other kind of very special riparian woodland made of poplar trees. Here we had a nice walk around. This is one of the big targets there, the yellow-eyed pigeon. Looked just like a rock pigeon, or a feral pigeon, but had this like yellow eye-ring. Very localized bird. We also got this white-winged woodpecker, very similar to the greater spotted woodpecker. And back in the desert, we had this migrating Eurasian honey buzzard, which had sort of landed on the ground. We drove up to it and got really nice photos as it took off. From the desert, it was back to Almaty, and we spent a night there before flying up to a city in the north called Astana. It was called Nur Sultan. Recently, it had its name changed, and then it had its name changed back to Astana. So it's Astana again. We flew into the airport there, and then we drove out to a place called Kyrgyzstan, which is these kind of steppe grasslands. And on the drive out there, we saw some of these beautiful falcons called the red-footed falcon. This is a male here, and the female. These fly all the way to southern Africa. You get a lot in Botswana on their wintering grounds, and they fly up here to breed. One of the big targets of the steppe grasslands is the black lark. Very unique species, mostly found within the steppe grasslands in Kazakhstan, and just all black with this pale bill. They do these like flight displays, and yeah, really, really fantastic birds, emblematic of the steppe grasslands. Another big target there is a white-winged lark, which we got really good views of. This is one walking on the ground, beautiful little rufous cap. We stayed in the town of Kyrgyzstan in a very rustic lodge. The rooms were pretty basic, but the meals were excellent. They gave us lots of salads and vegetables. The local guide, who's guided dozens and dozens of these tours, was shocked when we got there because they'd made this dish of horse meat. And this was a very special honor. And he said normally they'd make this for like weddings and things like that. So he felt very honored that they'd made this horse meat dish. I found it very unusual because all the cowboys around the steppe, they all ride motorbikes, but the place is full of horses, but nobody rides them. They eat them. But yeah. Another thing that I got to try was this fermented horse milk. I was very curious about it, but I'm not sure I would drink it again. It's very sour, kind of a little bit fizzy, funny aftertaste, but definitely worth a try if you've never had horse milk before. As well as the grasslands, there's also a lot of lakes and ponds with a lot of waterfowl, lots of geese. There's some geese and swans breeding there. And this is us on the edge of a wetland here, full of things like marsh harrier and these beautiful breeding plumage terns. This is a white-winged tern, white-winged black tern, which are in full breeding plumage here. And a very similar looking black tern, which has grey rather than white wings, and they like slightly different habitats. Another big target here was the bearded reedling, which we got a glimpse of, but countable, and the ladies that were collecting families were delighted to be able to get the bearded reedling as well. Another fantastic bird here is a Pallas's gull. Spectacular large gull with a black hood and this bright yellow and red bills, breeding in big numbers here as well. And that was the end of our birding. We drove back to the city of Astana, where we spent the night, and we also had a look around this very modern city, a lot of modern statues and things, very interesting place. We took a walk around the Palace of Peace and Reconciliation. Beautiful park. They've planted a lot of trees there. I think it's going to be a fantastic birding site in the future. We even added a bird to the list, the redback shrike. We also got to look around the main mosque there. Beautiful inside. Very welcoming. Anybody can go in. This is an area for prayer of both men and women. Very inclusive take on Islam here. And also we took a look at this beautiful footbridge that they had, which is supposed to be the shape of the sturgeon. And you can see that, the fish where you get caviar from. So yeah, we took a little walk around there, and we saw lots of other cool stuff. And from there, that was the end of the tour. We flew out from Astana and connected with our international flights. Here's the eBird trip report, which I mentioned there on this 3-week trip. Not huge numbers. We got 230 species, photographed over 150 species there. Hit a lot of interesting habitats, or a lot of cool things, a lot of beautiful scenery, very different culture. If you're interested in Central Asian culture, it's a really fascinating part of the world. So I definitely recommend this tour. I hope you enjoyed this video trip report. I hope to see you on this tour in the future. All the best. Take care.